Okay, the recording is now going. So DHI testing in goats. It sounds really complicated, and there's some parts that are complex, but it's not really as difficult as a lot of people think. We're going to go through the complicated part first. But first of all, what is dairy improvement testing? So, in a nutshell, dairy herd improvement testing includes weighing and sampling milk from all the representatives of a breed within a herd on a regular schedule. And so we have different test types that we can use and you have to select the test type that fits your herd the best. And we'll go through the different testing options. And so this provides data, lactation data that you can use as a herd owner, data that the Council for Dairy Cattle Breeding can use in calculating your genetic evaluations, and data for goat registries. So AGS and the American Dairy Goat Association. So American Goat Society and American Dairy Goat Association are the registries that provide DHI testing for goats. And so you can use this within your herd to calculate your individual animal performance and your herd performance. And again, this is used for genetic evaluation through the CDCB and the two registries. Any questions so far? Type them in the chat box if you have questions. So why would you want to participate in DHI testing? The big reason is it will aid you as a producer in evaluating your herd. It gives you information about individual animal production, so you know which are your high producers and which are your low producers. It can aid in culling decisions based on that information. One of the important things that it provides is a somatic cell count for each animal at each test. So somatic cells are cells that have nuclei in them. And so the cells with the nuclei, those are indicative, or they indicate there might be some white cells there might be an infection in the udder. So it helps you identify whether or not there's a low level of mastitis in an animal or in your herd. And so through looking at your test day data, looking at which are your producers and which are not, and looking at the animals that consistently have a high somatic cell count, it can help you with your culling decisions. And then with the registries, they can get a good idea of which are your high quality sires, which are the sires that indicate that, or the indicators are that they will produce a lot of milk in their daughters. And then also they can use these to develop lactation curves to be able to extrapolate to other animals what's going on. And they can create breed averages, which are helpful to all of us as producers. And so here are some important terms and acronyms that we have to learn if we're going to be doing anything with DHI testing. So first of all, we have our two registries that we are using, that we work with for DHI testing. So both of these are dairy herd improvement registries. We have the American Dairy Goat Association, ADGA or ADGA for short, and we have the American Goat Society, which is AGS for short. So DHI stands for Dairy Herd Improvement. DHIA is Dairy Herd Improvement Association, and we'll go into what that is in a couple of slides. DHIR is Dairy Herd Improvement Registry. That's the role that ADGA and AGS play for goats. DRPC Dairy Records Processing Center, CDCB, Council of Dairy Cattle Breeding. So these are the different organizations that we'll be working with if we're on DHI testing. And then there's some other terms that we need to understand, some acronyms that we use within DHI testing. So OS is owner sampler. AR is advanced registry, and we'll go into what that is later in the presentation. ST is for star volume, and again we'll go into what that is later on. SG is superior genetics, which we're not going to talk about that in this presentation, but if you see that term, then you know what it is. Star milker, so the asterisk next to an M is star milker. And again, we're not going into that in this presentation. D/A is daughter average. DIM is days in milk. ITP is innovative test plan, and VT is verification test. So these are kind of some important terms and acronyms that we need to know. And so if you only have one goat that's not in milk, there's no need for a DHI testing. This is looking at, so DHI testing is for someone who has a few milkers or even a large herd. It could be a commercial herd, and you want to have genetic improvement and production in your herd. You want to be able to evaluate your herd. That's what this is for. So the Council for Dairy Cattle Breeding is kind of the overarching organization that oversees DHI and genetic evaluations nationwide with both cows and goats. So it's designed for dairy cows, but they do offer services for goats as well. It's a nonprofit organization, and it's taken the place of some other organizations that have kind of folded into it. It calculates and distributes genetic evaluations. So some of this information used to come through some of the government services through USDA, and now it's all with this nonprofit organization. So all the records from both DHI testing and type appraisal, so if anybody participates in linear appraisal, that data goes to CDCB as well. And that's used for genetic evaluation calculations. Again, that's where your superior genetics comes in. So dairy herd improvement and linear appraisal data is combined with pedigree data that's provided by the goat registries. So ADGA and AGS send pedigree information to the CDCB, and they get back the genetic evaluations tied to that pedigree data. And then the CDCB also posts this information in a searchable database on their website. So dairy herd improvement registries are cattle or goat associations that follow the uniform operating procedures and the code of ethics for the National Dairy Herd Improvement Program. As I said before, American Dairy Goat Association and AGS are the two registries that do this for goats. So they are DHIRs. They offer advanced registry to animals that meet the minimum standards for DHI testing. And each of these associations has minimum milk requirements and also minimum data standard requirements. And as we said on the previous slide, they provide pedigree information to CDCB and to receive that genetic evaluation data back. And that genetic evaluation data is what they use in calculating, you might see ETA or PTI on pedigrees, so that's what's used for calculating that. So both of these registries restrict the DHIR program to members only. That doesn't mean that you can't do DHI testing. You just can't do DHI testing through a DHIR if you are not a member. You can still have your goats on DHI testing, and they don't even have to be registered as long as you go through a DHIA. And we'll talk about what a DHIA is in the next slide. And so as a DHIR for goats, the American Dairy Goat Association maintains a list of DHIAs that are familiar with goats. And that list is one of the documents that's in that Google Drive that I shared with you. So for both of these programs, for both AGS and ADGA, You enroll annually in the program. So you have your initial enrollment and then you have to renew every year. And both organizations will give awards based on performance criteria, and you can go to their websites to be able to get that data. So ADGA is where most of our breeders are going to be. Yeah, the ADGA is the largest dairy goat registry in the U.S., and they have a little bit more advanced program than AGS does. AGS is a purebred only registry. So no, there's no need to be part of both registries. One or the other is fine. I said most people are going to participate in DHIR through ADGA. But yeah, since there are some people who are AGS members, they do have that option to go through AGS if they're not an ADGA member. So DHIA stands for Dairy Herd Improvement Association. So these can be one or more associations that are organized into a regional affiliate. And so there are different groups. Yeah, Langston DHIA is one example, Dairy One, DHI West. So depending on they can be in different parts of the country, but you don't have to use the one closest to you. But you do want to think about shipping time because most of the DHIAs are going to have a lab that's right there with the DHIA. So the lab is closely affiliated with the DHIA. But this is your first point of contact when it comes to DHI testing, no matter which registry you're using. You want to identify the Dairy Herd Improvement Association that you're going to work with and talk to the manager there or the program manager for DHI. And so you want to identify your lab and you want to identify which DRCP that you're going to use through your lab. This is the organization that's going to assign you a herd code. You're not going to get that from your registry. The herd code comes from the DHIA. And so the DHI lab is the actual laboratory that's going to process your samples. So they evaluate the samples for butterfat, protein, somatic cell counts. So those are the standard things that they evaluate. But some of them will have options to perform pregnancy tests or other types of testing on the milk. And so it just kind of depends on which lab. Okay, so how long after they start producing milk should I reach out to the DHIA? So you want to reach out immediately. You don't necessarily have to start testing immediately, but the sooner the better. If you are on test, you're going to have a regular monthly test, and you will milk any does that are 5 days or more into their lactation. You don't want to do it earlier than 5 days because the colostrum can gum up the machines, but 5 days is when they want to start you on test. But ideally, you're going to start within a month or two of the lactation beginning so you can get better data. So I would go ahead and reach out to your DHIA now. And so your labs work in conjunction with the DHIAs. Usually they're part of the DHIA, and then they're going to work with the dairy record processing centers. So all the data that comes from the lab is going to be sent to your dairy record processing center. And so the Dairy Record Processing Center aggregates the data from the different DHIAs. You'll have some DHIAs that only work with one Dairy Record Processing Center. And I see that I've gotten some letters out of order on the slide, but you have some that'll just work with one. You'll have some that work with more than one. So if your DHIA just works with one, then you don't have to make any more decisions. If they work with more than one, you will have to select which Dairy Record Processing Center, DRPC, you're going to work with. And so the DRPCs, there aren't that many of them. There are, I think, about 5. There's a list of them. Again, later on, I have a link to where you can get the list. So you will actually not have any contact with your DRCPs. This will all go through your DHIA. And then they collect all the data from each test, both the data from the milk weights and the data from the lab results, and they'll submit it to the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. So that once the registries receive the data from the the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, CDCB, then it's used for advanced registry. So advanced registry is when you have a plan that meets the requirements, that meets the data gathering requirements. And so these records are printed on your pedigrees and they're used in genetic evaluations. Now, there are some plans that don't meet advanced registry requirements. So this would be your owner sampler star volume and your one-day milk test. Those do not meet advanced registry requirements, and so those go into the star volume. And so they do not go on pedigrees. You'll still get the star milker. You'll still get that award, but it doesn't go into your genetic evaluations. So if you want to take an animal from champion to grand champion, then a one-day milk test or owner sampler could do that. But if you really want to get those genetic evaluations, then you need to go with a plan that allows for advanced registry. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, so I saw something listed with milk test for the Indiana State Fair. Yes, that is a one-day milk test. So with a standard test, you're going to use one certified tester or DHI technician. The tester cannot be a family member, and they can't have any financial interest in any goat in the herd. And so they would get certified by your DHI. Your DHIA, provides the certification for all of your technicians or certified testers. A group test would involve 3 or more people who are involved in DHI testing. Reciprocal testing is not allowed, which is why it has to be a minimum of 3, unless it just happens with your order within a group test situation. And so all 3 of these would have to become certified testers through the DHIA. If you register with AGS, they require that all of the members of the group be on the same test plan. ADGA does not require it, but they encourage all members to be on the same test plan. So that's the difference between a standard test and a group test. But both of these will use the same test plans. So test supervisors are people who are approved by your DHIA to perform milk tests. They could be called test supervisors through ADGA, and AGS calls them DHI technicians. Some of your DHIAs will assign a test supervisors, and some of them will allow you to find someone to be trained as a tester. It just depends on the DHIA you're working with. But you are going to work through your DHIA to identify your test supervisor or your DHI technician. The registries are not involved in tester certification. That's an important thing to remember. They do not keep databases of certified testers. So some people who are looking for a tester will reach out to social media, and that tends to be a pretty effective way. So you might consider a state dairy goat list or an area or region dairy goat list. We have a District 3 list, District 4 list, each of the ADGA districts has their own list on Facebook. So again, your test supervisor cannot be related to you, and they cannot have a financial interest in your herd. So owner sampler falls under a different category, and we will go through the different testing options in just a minute. Before you can start test, before you can enroll in DHIR through either registry, you need a herd code. This is a unique 8-digit number that's assigned by your DHIA. So when you contact your DHIA, they will assign you a herd code. And you are the one responsible for providing this number to the registry. So all the animals under the same management get the same herd code. So it could be multiple people that house their animals at the same place. For instance, 4-H members. If you have several 4-H members that house their animals on somebody's farm, all of those animals would go under the same herd code. So they don't have to be related to be part of that herd code. It's all the animals that are under the same management. And so something that I don't put in here, but that you need to remember is that all the animals of the same breed in the same herd need to be on test. You can have one breed that's on test and another breed that's not, but all animals, all does of the same breed need to be on test. So ADGA offers several different test types and plans, and AGS does as well. So all of this test plan information comes directly from the ADGA guidebook and the AGS DHI rules and procedures. I'm personally more familiar with ADGA because when I milk tested in the past, I did it through ADGA. So the standard group or test plan options include the DHI R20 standard, the ADGA ITP 00 every other month, the ADGA ITP 01. That's one where you have AM and PM with a timer. The ADGA ITP 02. That's also an AM PM. The 22, another AM PM, and then the 23 AM PM. So there's some different innovative test plans that are available. Then we have the owner sampler plans. So there's the STAR plan and the advanced registry plan, and we'll go through what's involved with both of those. So AGS. Okay, so different tests based on when milk is collected. Well, it's more of how frequently the samples are taken and who's responsible. So we'll go through the details of each of the plans. So the AGS plans look a lot like the ADGA plans. If they have the same code, they're essentially the same plan. And so the 20, the 02, the 01, the 00, the 22, and the 40 are all similar to ADGA plans. The 31 is one that's a little bit different. So with DHI R20, this is the standard ADGA plan. So your test supervisor is going to weigh and sample all the milk from all milkings during a 24-hour period. So you as the herd owner, you will do a pre-test milk out. You'll record the time of your pre-test milk out. You'll give that time to your test supervisor. It doesn't matter when your first milking is, but your second milking can be no later than 24 hours after your milk out. You can even do 3 milkings in a day. So you could do a first, second, and third, but your last milking that's part of the test has to be 24 hours after you did that pre-test milk out. Does that make sense? So the verification test is not required for you to get advanced registry if you are on DHIR 20 or code 20 with AGS, because there's plenty of supervision with this test type, and so they're not too worried about you cheating. And so you can get advanced registry without a verification test. However, if you want to be eligible for breed leader with ADGA, you do need a verification test. Because breed leader, they want everybody to have a higher standard if you're a breed leader. They want to make sure that there are no questions about the data for the animals that get that top 10. So if you want to qualify for breed leader, then you need a verification test. If you are not worried about qualifying for breed leader, or your animals won't qualify, a verification test is not necessary. Okay, the ITP 00 or the code 00 every other month. So ADGA and AGS offer the same plan. So in this case, the owner and the supervisor alternate months. So the supervisor might be at your March test, AM and PM take samples and data. And then the owner, you would just weigh the milk and send in the barn sheets. You wouldn't send in samples. So your supervisor would weigh and would collect all the samples. So you would only have samples taken every other month, and then you'd be responsible for the other month. ADGA may audit you if you choose this plan. There aren't a whole lot of people that choose this plan. Both registries require a verification test if you're going to use this plan, and it's not accepted for ADGA Top 10 awards. So it's an innovative test plan. but it's probably not the best choice of a test plan. The ITP-01. So in this case, you're going to share responsibility with the test supervisor for collecting weights. You're going to alternate between AM and PM each month. So your supervisor or technician is going to collect the component samples. And see, the reason why you alternate AM and PM is because there's research that shows that goats will actually have different components in the morning than they will in the evening. So we want to make sure that with each test, if you're only sampling during one of the two milkings, that the test supervisor is alternating which milking they're sampling from. And so ADGA and AGS are a little bit different with this one, where the owner always does the first weighing for this plan. And so with AGS, you might start in the evening one month and might start in the morning the next month. With ADGA, it doesn't matter which one, as long as the supervisor technician is alternating AM and PM. This requires a time monitor. And this, with the time monitor, this does qualify you for the ADGA Top 10 awards. This does require a verification test. And that's because and the reason being is because you're sharing that responsibility. Okay, so the ADGA ITP 02. This is one that I have done before. So I've done the ADGA 20 and I've done the 02. So the DHI technician or test supervisor and the owner share the responsibility for collecting test day weights, alternating the AM PM each month. So only the DHI technician is going to sample the milk. Actually, this is the one where AGS requires the owner weigh and record weights at the first milking of each test day. And a herd verification test is required for this one as well. And this does make you eligible for top 10 eligibility. Okay, so similar to the O2 plan, so this is the DHIR 22 or the code 22. Okay, which one is better? Well, I would say that either. Actually, I think this was the one I did instead of the O2. I think I did the 22. So I like DHI 20 if you have a supervisor that can be there twice. So why you would go with one where the supervisor is only present at one milking is because you might have somebody who just doesn't have the time to be there for both milkings. Like say you have a test supervisor that is pretty busy with work and they just don't have time to come out twice. That's why you might choose one of the innovative plans. So actually, no, I did the DHIR 02 is what I did, or the ADGA 02 is what I did. So verification test, it depends on the plan. So with the DHI 20, verification test is only done, you only need to do it for those that are up for top 10. But with the 02 and the 01, you have to do it for the entire herd. Actually, maybe not the 01. Let me go back. Verification test is required for everybody regardless of whether they're going to qualify for top 10 on the 02. So on the 01, the verification test is required. So 01 and 02, you have to have a verification test for advanced registry. But the DHIR 22, because the technician is performing all the data collection, then you don't have to have the verification test. So you have to have a verification test if the owner is taking some of the weights. If it's just the technician, then you don't have you don't have to have the verification test. So in this case, the tester would be, the test supervisor would be performing all the data collection, weighing all the milk at both milkings, but they're only collecting one sample per test, alternating AM and PM. So which one is better for a small herd? It really depends on what you have available as far as a tester. If you have a friend who's willing to test for you and who's willing to spend time there, I mean, the gold standard is the DHI R20. That's my favorite test plan, but it's not always feasible. So it comes down to feasibility. Then we have the DHI R23. This is just for commercial dairies that have a bulk tank. So this would be for your large tests. So in this case, the DHI test supervisor is going to collect one test day weight. They're going to alternate the AM and PM. The DRCP, so the second weight is going to be calculated by the DRCP. And so the component samplings will be collected when the supervisor weighs. You may have more more requirements determined by the breed association, and it's important to compare to the bulk tank. And so this does not require a verification test, but again, this is just for commercial herds. The code 31 AM/PM without a time monitor, so this is an AGS plan. This is not an ADGA plan. In this case, the DHI technician is going to weigh and sample, one time, alternating 1 month with AM and PM the next month, and this does require a verification test. So owner sampler, this is, if you don't have access to a tester or you can't get somebody to test for you, then this is your option. So it's available through both ADGA and AGS. The owner needs to be a certified DHIA tester through your DHIA, but most of these plans do not, in fact, all of them do not meet the level of accountability that's required for top 10 awards. So you cannot be top 10 with any owner sampler plan. Verification test is required, actually, not just for advanced registry, but for anything with these. So the verification is required even to get star awards with owner sampler. So your DHI 40 star award through ADGA or the AGS code 40 is going to be just for your star. So in this case, the owner is going to weigh and sample all the milkings on test day. The verification test is required between 60 and 150 days in milk. So ADGA will allow this if the majority of the herd is within the time frame. Like 75% or better, I think, is what Lisa said. But AGS requires that there be a verification test of every animal within that time frame. So you might have to do multiple verification tests with AGS. Okay, the question, can I still show at ADGA shows without testing? Yes. Testing is not required for ADGA shows. Milk testing is totally optional. So again, this plan does not qualify for advanced registry in either ADGA or AGS. You have to have a minimum data collection rating of 75. So I didn't go into data collection rating in any of the slides, but what that is it's a formula based on the number of tests and the consistency of the tests. And so so you have to have a 75 data collection rating to get star volume recognition through ADGA. And then with these tests, this does not go through CDCB because it's not an advanced registry test. So you're going to have to send documentation. You're going to have to send your dough sheet to ADGA or AGS. Now, ADGA did a few years ago offer an option to get advanced registry through owner sampler. It's very similar in that you're going to weigh and sample all your milkings on test day. It requires a verification test at the same time frame. But you have to have a minimum of eight tests and minimum of 240 days in milk in order to qualify. You have to make sure that you properly label your test type plan, and there are supervisor codes that you have to include as well. And you must send a copy of your training documentation signed by your DHI manager to ADGA. So ADGA will have to have a copy of that in order for you to qualify for advanced registry through this plan. And so if you have records for your goats that meet those requirements, they are eligible for advanced registry recognition. You will have to list the Test 69 plan code with your lactation record. So no, there is not a minimum days in milk requirement for the previous owner sampler. For the star, there's not. But there's a higher level of requirements if you want advanced registry through owner sampler. Does that make sense? But even with these higher level of requirements, it's still not eligible for top 10 breed leader because you don't have the same level of accountability with owner sampler. And so to enroll in DHI testing, both registries require that you contact your DHIA before you enroll in DHIR. Okay, question. Do you have to do a milk test if you win at a show? No. Milk tests are not required for showing at all. So once you've identified your DHIA and your DICP and you have your herd code, then you can enroll in DHIA through your registry. You can enroll at any time of year. So you can actually start testing, DHI testing, before you enroll in DHIR. But you're not going to get any credit for awards until you enroll in DHIR. So online or paper forms are available for ADGA DHIR. There's separate forms for new and renewing herds. And again, make sure you contact your DHIA before you sign up for DHIR. You may enroll in DHIR at any time of the year. Your cost is going to be based on your herd size. Renewal fees are cheaper than your initial fees. And the renewals due on January 31st each year. So one thing to know about DHI testing is this is a year-round commitment. If you like to have 4 or 5 months off from milking every year, DHI testing is not for you. You might just want to participate in one-day milk tests. But if you're serious about genetic improvement, if you're serious about production, the DHI testing is a really good tool. So through AGS, they do not have an online enrollment option available. So they have a form that you can fill out and you can email it. And they will send you a renewal form each year through their association. So in order to go on tests, you need some basic equipment. And this equipment can be provided by your tester, by your test supervisor. So you'll need a scale or a meter that weighs in pounds and tenths of pounds, because those are the units that are used for DHI testing. So your scales have to be certified annually. If you use a meter, it needs to be DHI or ICAR approved. So ICAR is an international organization that approves measuring devices. You'll need a sampling ladle. So you want a ladle that's made of a non-reactive material, such as stainless steel. You can find specially made DHI ladles, but they're not required. And then you will need testing vials and paperwork, and these are provided by your DHIA. Your scales, your milk meters have to be calibrated annually. And most of your DHIAs will provide these services. And so talk to your DHI manager or your DHI coordinator at your DHIA about calibration. This is not done through ADGA or AGS. It's going to be done through your DHIA. You can also use a private lab as long as it's a certified lab. And if you're using a milk meter, and this would just be your commercial dairies that have a pipeline system, they would need a quality certification service certified technician to calibrate those annually, so every 12 months. So accurate weights are really important. For your test day procedures, so on most test days, the owner's responsibility is responsible for the pre-test milk out. So as the herd owner, you are going to milk out your goat, and you're going to write down the time when you started your milk out and when you ended the milk out. You're going to provide that to your test supervisor or technician. So when the test supervisor arrives, they're going to tear the scale. So tearing, making sure that it's at 0. And depending on the type of scale, so an electronic scale, you just press the tear button. That's easy. With a with a hanging, with your manual scales or your old-fashioned scales, it's going to take a little bit more work, but you want to make sure that it's on 0 before you get started. The test supervisor is going to make sure that the paperwork's in order and that anything that needs to be filled out ahead of the test is done. That they have the pre-weights, the times for that entered on the materials, and that you have the preservative tablet and the sample vial. So that preservative tablet is really important. If that preservative tablet isn't in there, your samples will get spoiled and you're not going to get any data from the lab. So the test supervisor is going to record the time that you begin milking and the time that you end. They're going to check the tattoo of every animal that you bring out to be milked and compare it with the paperwork. It's your responsibility to milk out your animal completely. So it doesn't matter when your first milking is, as long as your second milking or your final milking for the test is 24 hours after you did the pre-test milk out. And so the test supervisor will pour the milk into the weigh bucket and record the weight. Or if you're using a meter, they will record the weight from the meter and take a sample. And so the test supervisor or technician is going to make sure that the milk is mixed thoroughly. And so it can be poured back and forth 3 times between 2 buckets, or you can use the ladle to stir it really well. But milk is not going to be uniform unless it's thoroughly mixed. And so we want to make sure we get a uniform sample, a representative sample. And so I have a diagram there. I show there's a sample vial and it has a line on it. Okay, question about tattoos. Do you need tattoos to show? Yes. Tattoos are required for anything that you do with the American Dairy Goat Association. Okay, so you have a sample vial. It has a line on it. If you're taking 2 samples during the test, like you would in a DHI 20 test plan, you'll fill it halfway to that line the first time and the rest of the way to the line the second time. If you're just taking 1 sample, then you're going to fill it to the line. That line shows you the amount of milk that the machines need to be able to do the testing. And so then your test supervisor is going to rock your sample vial gently to ensure that the preservative dissolves in the milk sample. Again, if that preservative doesn't get completely dissolved, then your milk can spoil in shipping. The test supervisor is then going to record the ending time for the milking and complete the paperwork. And so you need to provide your test supervisor with information on any does that have newly freshened or recently dried off, or anything else that they might need to code, because these codes provide information to the DRCP and to CDCB about what's going on with this animal. Is there some reason that might be affecting the test weight? So do they need to adjust the test weight based on what's going on with this animal? And then the test supervisor is the one that's responsible for shipping the samples and the paperwork to the laboratory. So it's not the owner's responsibility, it's the test supervisor's responsibility. Unless you're doing owner sampler, and then it's your responsibility for everything. So once your samples are processed, the DHI laboratory is going to send you a sample box with new vials and your herd test results from the previous test. And then they're going to send those same test results to the DRCP, who will then send them they'll do their calculations and send those calculations to the CDCB. And then the CDCB will combine those test day results and those calculations from the DRPC to complete the genetic evaluations. And so the information from the CDCB will then go to your registry, AGS or American Dairy Goat Association. So this is what your monthly report form looks like that you would get back. This was kind of old. It's probably, yeah, 2007. So this is a 13-year-old form, but they haven't changed a whole lot in 13 years. And so you'll get your test day weights, and you will get an estimation for what they're expecting that animal to do during that test. So this is, you have your lactation to date, and then you have your expected lactation amount. And then on the right, that is a doe page. So that's what you get at the end of the lactation after the doe's been dried off. And if you're doing owner sampler, that's what you're going to send to your registry. Okay, so verification testing. So this is a step up from your average test day. So you have to use a different test supervisor than you normally do. So if your neighbor is doing your monthly tests, you need to find somebody else who can be your test supervisor. The one-day milk test at Indiana State Fair or any other organization that's offering a one-day milk test, that can be used for your verification test. It's going to be the same general procedures, except your milk test, your initial milk out is going to have to be supervised. And so there's a little bit more paperwork that has to be filled out. But again, it's not really that different from a normal test day. It just takes it's just a few more steps that are involved, including that a little bit more supervision. So one-day milk test. So these are offered by both AGS and ADGA, and this gets you star volume recognition. So you will have the supervised milk out, and then your test supervisor or technician will supervise all the milkings within a 24-hour period. They use days in milk, volume of milk, and volume of butterfat to calculate awards for a one-day milk test. So if you really don't like milking year round, but you still want that star, then this is a good way to get it. But it actually takes a higher level of production to be able to get a star through a one-day milk test than it does to get a star through owner sampler or advanced registry. Any questions about one-day milk test? Okay, so for more information, you can go to the ADGA guidebook and the ADGA website if you're looking for ADGA rules. If you're looking for your local rules, you need to contact your DHI manager. So the rules for your DHIA. So one-day milk test, yeah, can be good for small herds if you don't want to milk year round. But again, the key is you need a higher volume of milk in order to get a star from a one-day milk test than you do through DHI testing. It really depends on what your commitment is to milking year round. And so for national rules, use the webpage for National DHIA. They have the overarching rules for DHI, they have uniform operating procedures, and the code of ethics. And then here's a list of resources. This presentation is in that Google Drive file that I shared. So you can go to all these websites through, from this presentation. You can find that there. So all of these are good, but they may be a little complicated. Feel free to contact me directly if you have questions and want explanation. And also the Performance Programs Coordinator at ADGA is Lisa Shepard. She's a really good resource. If you have any questions about DHI through ADGA, she's the person you need to contact. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and open this up for everybody to be able to talk. Give me just a minute. Okay, everyone's unmuted, so questions. Okay. I've posted the link to the Google Drive folder again in the chat box. So the slideshow is available in that folder. We will be having another webinar next week. I will be posting the link to that on my Facebook page. I'll get that link up tomorrow, but it's going to be on milk handling safety. And then there should be a link to a survey. And let me get that link just in case it doesn't show up for you. I would appreciate it if all of you would fill out the survey. That helps us get some data and helps us lets us know, helps let my bosses know that I'm actually doing a good job. So so we want to hear back from you. So here's your survey link if you want to. Let's see. Hopefully that went through. Okay, so how do you finish a test year? So finishing a test year, you don't really finish a test year, you dry off your animals. And so you report on your test day if the animals are dry. And so if all the animals are dry, you just fill out the paperwork and you just mark dry on all the animals and you send it in. So there may be 2 months out of the year where you're sending just an envelope with the paperwork that says dry for all the animals. So any other questions? If not, we'll go ahead and conclude this webinar. Thank you all for coming, and I hope to get some feedback from you.